the issues are getting more complex. Remember, on the 26th of July, the members of the presidential guard of the president of Niger seized the president and then sacked his government in a coup. And since then, the ECOWAS, meaning the Economic Community of West African States, this Economic Alliance of West African States, met in Abuja and issued a whole range of ultimatums and sanctions against the coup plotters in order to force them into restoring the democratically elected president, Mohamed Bazoum, whom they overthrew. And they gave them a 7-day ultimatum to do that. And this ultimatum expired yesterday, Sunday, the 6th of August. And now the whole world is watching with bated breath what is going to be the next step from ECOWAS. We have to remember that it's getting interesting because ECOWAS is being backed by the United States and by France and the EU. Because the EU and the US and France have substantial military assets and economic interests. We have to remember that Niger supplies over 32% of the uranium needs of the French Republic. And we know that 80% of French electricity comes from nuclear reactors, and they source the uranium for that from Niger. And the United States has the largest drone base one of the largest drone bases in the world in Niger, from where they conduct operations against Islamic militants before they could attack the American homeland or American interests in other parts of Africa and the world. And the EU, Agadez, a city in Niger, serves as one of the last stops of migrants seeking to enter Europe before they get to the Mediterranean. So, and the EU has been financing over the years a program in collaboration with the Niger government to stop and stem the tide of migrants getting to the Mediterranean from Agadez. So all these three foreign parties have substantial interest in maintaining the status quo because they can trust the military putschists or the coup plotters to not to renege on the agreements that the former democratic government entered into and which has been sustained all this while. So ECOWAS is being supported by these blocs. And but at the moment, a lot of Nigerians, the ECOWAS chairmanship, Nigeria is the chairman of the ECOWAS at the moment. And so President Bola Tinubu, the newly elected Nigerian president, was on the forefront trying to issue threats and ultimatums to the coup plotters. But as the Nigerian constitution does not give the president unilateral powers to declare war or to effect a military intervention in another country without the Senate's confirming and giving him those powers. And the Nigerian Senate a few days ago rejected the letter and rejected that move by the president and refused to grant him the necessary powers that he needed. So right now, Nigeria has gone back to the drawing board to see what they can do. And the ECOWAS foreign defense ministers will be meeting again in Abuja on Thursday. So they are saying that at the moment, we have not decided on a line of action. We are going to meet on Thursday to decide further on what to do. But the voices against the military action in Niger are growing vehement. And in Nigeria at the moment, the Senate has rejected that. Prominent northern Nigerian politicians are coming out strongly against that because they believe that there is a long line between Niger Republic and northern Nigeria. And that is the case. It was going back to ancient times. So many people in the north of Nigeria see people in Niger Republic as their kith and kin. So they wouldn't want to see the Nigerian government attacking their brothers because they on the other side of the colonial divide, what they call the boundaries between these two countries. So this is the situation now. The pressure, France is ready to go the entire length to make sure that democracy is restored in order to protect her interests. The United States as well is ready too, but they are not ready to supply the bodies because the United States and Europe or the NATO bloc is presently occupied in the trying to supply weapons to the Ukraine. So Ukraine is taking a substantial part of their attention at the moment. So they are looking for people that will supply the bodies, and ECOWAS seems to be, this Economic Community of West African States seems ready to undertake that. And we have to know that this is not the first time that ECOWAS will be stepping up to do America's bidding in West Africa. America financed ECOMOG in the early 90s to go into Liberia to the tune of $100 million, according to American sources, which is in their State Department books, $100 million. And Nigeria led ECOMOG to restore peace in Sierra Leone and in Liberia with American financing. So that
what is ECOMOG for those who maybe don't know?
Thank you. ECOMOG is the ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African State military operation in Sierra Leone and Liberia that actually stopped the civil war in Liberia during Samuel Doe and Charles Taylor's era, and then during Sanko's incursions in Sierra Leone. So they were able to restore peace and then make sure that the war stopped. So America has been very much active because Liberia is the only country in Africa that America had a direct influence in creating. So America doesn't have a colony in Africa, so to say, but Liberia was created by freed American slaves. So yeah, so this is the situation at the moment. It's growing more complex. One should not forget that about at least two West African nations have come out in support of the coup plotters in Niger. Burkina Faso and Mali are on record as stating that any attack by ECOWAS on Niger Republic will be considered an attack on these two countries, and that they are ready to send military personnel in defense of Niger. And this is very tricky because it does not only show that there is now cracks in the ECOWAS alliance, it shows equally that this may portend great danger. This may lead to the very first all West African war in the history of the continent. And in my opinion, in my considered assessment, Africa, the Sahel region cannot afford a war at the moment because these countries have already ranked very high on the global fragility index. Many of these countries are so very fragile. About 9 to 10 countries in the Sahel region or around it are already under intense domestic pressure, fighting terroristic insurgencies, and Nigeria is one of them. So if there's a military action in Niger Republic, it may end up destabilizing the whole region. And then since Libya collapsed, since Libya became a failed state in 2011 after NATO's incursion, it created an avenue for the proliferation of small arms in the Sahel. And it gave leeway for Islamic insurgent fighters to, be cross-border operations around the Sahel. So this may give them more leeway, and this may lead to more weapons being in the region and increased violence and sectarian violence. We are seeing almost all of that there. Boko Haram, Islamic State for West Africa, all of them are operating in that region. So it's a very volatile region. So from my perspective as a human rights, the Director of Genocide Prevention at the CSI, I will really say that a lot of people are going to be displaced in case of a military intervention. Niger already hosts 300,000 Nigerian refugees. 300,000 at the moment. These are people that fled not only Fulani militants, but also Boko Haram. So they are in Niger Republic. So adding to this number and growing number of refugees, this may affect equally Europe, other West African countries. Sudan on the right of it is already in the middle of a civil war. Okay, so, and Tunisia, Algeria, all these are fighting Islamic or terroristic insurgencies. So this is a very, very volatile region. And this is why we call for caution in whatever is happening in this region at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting because, of course, part of why Niger is so important to the United States and to France is because it's a base to combat jihadists. Mm-hmm. What I'm hearing from you now is if there's a war over Niger, that will just make the jihadism problem way, way worse than it is now, potentially.
That's exactly what it is. Niger, we should tread carefully here because most of these governments, most of these democratically elected governments in Africa or around the Sahel, we have to be very honest about it, are democratic in names only. Okay, they have succeeded in rubbishing all the democratic structures that they inherited. So, and that's why you see most of these coups are gaining popular support from the populace of these countries. And then some of these militaries are the ones in the forefront fighting these insurgents. So when they have taken over the government, as we have seen in Burkina Faso and in Mali, their battle against the Islamic insurgents didn't stop. Okay, it continued, like the Malians and the Burkinabes are doing, and they invited, that will lead us to another angle, the Russian angle. They have invited the Wagner Group to help them in this encountering these insurgencies.
And if I can jump in here, Franklin, because I was just listening to a podcast before I jumped on here with you, that hosted a former senior British intelligence official, and according to him, the entire story in Niger is just Russia, Russia, Russia. Russia did this. Russia's trying to take Niger away from the West. How would you frame this for us?
Well, I am sorry, but we have to know that the British also have an interest in maintaining the status quo. The Russians are not present in Niger at the moment. The coup had nothing to do with the Russians or even the Wagner Group. They are not present there. The Americans have a base there. The Russians couldn't have been present without the Americans knowing or screaming about it the whole time, or France saying something about it. They knew that they were sidelined. They were actually sidelined because this is a palace coup. It came from within the presidential palace. It was not planned outside. So that's why it took the American intelligence agencies and the French intelligence agencies by surprise. It's not the Russians. Framing this narrative in terms of the Russians is just a continuation of the Ukrainian narrative in order to gain support for actions that they are planning in the future in their home countries, the British or the Americans or whatever. But that's not even the case. This coup is a homegrown palace coup that took everybody by surprise. Even the Americans themselves, who have about 2,000 soldiers stationed at the base in Niger, they had no idea that it was coming. The French had no idea. So it is not a French, even the Russian government came out heavily against the coup. They said that democracy should be restored. So what does that tell us about those trying to frame the narrative in terms of the Russians? No, this shows you that many Francophone African countries are growing tired of what they consider to be French meddling in their affairs. We saw that in Mali. The Malians have actually changed the official language now from French to a few local languages. And the Burkinabes are going to follow suit. So they are seeing their destiny being tied to France all this while as have not profited them in any way. So that's why you see the coup has gained popular support in these countries. It's not about, the Russians are not present at all. They have no military or economic assets anywhere in Niger. The Americans do, the French do, and the EU have a lot of aid agencies working in Niger. So it has nothing to do with the Russians, my brother.
And then just last question, maybe. It seems Nigeria is a country with a lot of problems. As you pointed out to me earlier, its own army is active in 32 of Nigeria's 36 states, trying to keep different insurgencies under control. It seems like a really bad idea for Nigeria to invade another country right now. And you mentioned, well, maybe the US is nudging Nigeria in this direction. But do you think Nigeria's president maybe has some other motives why he might be interested in having this sort of conflict?
Yes, of course. He has his own political motives. The Nigerian president now, Bola Tinubu, has a lot of illegitimacy questions hanging on his head. His elections the elections that brought him to power were marred by unprecedented irregularities. So for many Nigerians, he's not their president. And he knows that he has this baggage of illegitimacy hanging on his head. So, and he needs international support because the local support, domestic support, is not all that strong. So he needed international support to legitimize his government. And he may be playing into the gallery to appease the Americans and the French so that they will recognize his government. And you could see in French dailies, there are articles, which some of us will consider being planted by we know who, urging that Tinubu's credibility will rest on what he is able to achieve in Niger. Although Nigeria has myriads of domestic problems, we have a local insurgency that is consuming the whole country. The Fulani militants are committing genocide in the middle belt of Nigeria today. And the president has not even reasoned, has not even spoken a word about it. He has not reasoned in defense of his own people. Boko Haram is still active. The Islamic State for West Africa is still active. We have secessionist agitations in the southeast and the southwest of the country. So almost all over Nigeria, it is burning. Even in the Niger Delta, there is still oil bunkering that, that is a multi-billion-dollar mafia state that is being created there. And the president removed subsidy on petroleum immediately he came to power, thereby engendering a runaway inflation that people are no longer feeding. So Nigerians are growing poorer at his policies, and then he wants to start a war to divert attention from domestic problems and then to gain a little bit of legitimacy in the eyes of the West. So these are his he has a lot of baggage, and that's the danger there. He may overplay his hand and then land Nigeria in serious trouble. Nigeria cannot afford a war with anyone. The only war that Nigeria can afford at the moment is to contain the Fulani militants that are slaughtering people across the Middle Belt and the religious fanatics, jihadists that are trying to take over the country from under him. So these are the wars that are actually needed and is very urgent. External issues should not be the concern of any Nigerian president at the moment.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ogbunwezeh, for this fascinating discussion. This is one of those things that I think Western audiences, they'll hear Niger, what? Like, where is that? But you've really taken us on a great tour of what's going on in this critical region, actually. It is critical, even though we don't hear so much about it. Where also many of our Christian brothers and sisters live. So we will pray for peace and safety for everyone in this region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my brother Joel, and have a nice day. Greetings from Frankfurt.
Thank you. Greetings from Zurich.
Ciao.